Looking to start an adventure of a chili recipe you could call your own? Then this might be one of the good starting points. A Passionate Cookbook by Jane Butel, Chili Madness. If this book seems just a little familiar, that's because this book was initially published in 1980. There have been subsequent re-releases and updates and revised editions. You can find some of those actually on Amazon. This one I found at a secondhand shop because, of course, I did. And here we have something nice. We have Library of Congress information as well as citing sources from other recipes and other chefs. Nice to include that. Also a nice dedication from, I imagine, it's Jane's father. And I'd imagine also Ben is someone important to her. If you can read what it says. Now, before we get into the recipes, we do have to get into a bit of the history, storied as it is. Brought to us in part by the Chili Appreciation Society International, or CASI, founded in the 50s, now known as the International Chili Society. Yes, it did get a rename around the 2000s, like many things. And yes, it does go into who made chili, when, and where. It also includes a very interesting story, which we'll get to in a minute. And yes, these are going to be helpful information that you probably already know already, but hey, in case you don't. Moving on to 1850, where we have more grounded sources. We do have people who put into bricks, or at least pounded into bricks, things like dried beef, fat, pepper, salt, and chili peppers that could all be boiled together while you're walking on the trail. I imagine this saved a lot of people's lives and seems a little bit more likely. A little bit more likely. And later in the 1800s as well, we do have mention of the San Antonio Chili Queens, which is its own interesting, if somewhat depressing story, especially when you take into account food regulations. Moving on, we have the chili with an E that actually go into chili with an I. There is an important distinction there. Now, it mentions some rather classic chilies with an E, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You got to start somewhere. And fortunately, it does at least provide you with information on both dried and fresh chilies, although it doesn't quite mention that sometimes the dried and fresh chilies are the same thing, just under a different name. But hey, can't win them all. In chili making itself, it does have a few steps that you might want to follow, or at least take as basic ground rules. As you start making it yourself, there's 10 here, which are actually fairly useful. A little information here about cook-offs of chili past. It's kind of grown from here, but it's still nice to know that they at least included this. Getting on to recipes themselves, we do have some award-winning winners alongside some interesting recipes that have been provided. Some can be as complex that they take up a significant number of the page itself, even 2 pages. Some are fairly basic. It kind of runs the gamut, but it gives you an idea as to what you want to do with proper ingredients. Nothing too strange. Here we also have a pork chili, not quite the green chili that New Mexico is more known for, but hey, at least they included it. For those of you who are actually looking for green chilies in a chili recipe, here we go with the Amarillo chili. That includes both pork and beef, red and green chilies, so you can really go to town on this stuff. The recipe that H. Allen Smith was able to tie with in 1967. Again, not that complex, but sometimes it doesn't have to be. Next up, we have Carol Shelby's recipe. Again, it's about what you'd expect for a recipe itself. It even includes some Monterey Jack cheese because the boy likes his chili hot. And also chocolatey chili, which is actually a fairly common ingredient, especially if you're trying to make your chili more moly-like. And for those who are looking for something perhaps a little less spicy and a little more mild, here we have housebroken chili, which includes orange-flavored liqueur and orange rind, grated. A little different, but if it works, it works. First love chili. For those who haven't had chili, which I imagine there's fairly few, but would like to start out with something that isn't going to blow their face or their taste buds out. And again, we do have the bale on this one. We have what is known as gringo chili, which includes a lot of convenience items like tomato soup and onion soup. Now we have here a recipe from Esquire for chili. Not necessarily a magazine I would expect to have a recipe for chilies, but apparently in 1979 they did. From Jane Owen's, her own chili con carne, which has some flavors that are reminiscent of a Bavarian Oktoberfest. These include caraway seeds, sesame seeds, and pitted green olives. Okay, the olives are a little strange, but nothing I haven't seen before in chili. We'll get into that one another time. For chefs, we have our Pierre Lafreni here with their chili recipe, which includes apparently very lean beef and pork, both in coarse chili grind. I imagine that'd be about the 90-10 or the 99-1 for both of those. Next up, for cleverly named, we have High Abernathy's Georgia Chain Gang Chili, which, yeah, that is definitely a on the kitchen sink recipe. Here we go. Vegetarian chili, which uses bulgur wheat, which is something probably not found in every store, but you can at least find it in health food stores. So I imagine somebody's got to carry bulgur wheat. And here on the left we have Clyde's Chili, which is located in Washington, D.C. So I imagine at least people can get a decent version of chili over there, even though it is a tad more of a convenient style. That's not always a bad thing. Next up here we have Burt Green's Chili, which has the distinction of being different by putting it in a Dutch oven and then baking it in an oven for several hours, which is definitely an interesting and, quite frankly, quite delicious. And finally, here we have Australian Dinkum Chili, which, depending on how you write it, is going to be interesting. Here's we have the proper recipe itself. Here we have the recipe as it is written. So, if you can follow either of these, go ahead. Now here we have, or at least what were, mail order resources for some of the ingredients. Nowadays, it's a little more convenient to find these items, relatively speaking. It may be a little harder to find them, or might be a little more pricey, but you can at least find a lot of the ingredients these days, which is definitely a step. Now remember, this is just one of the introductory steps to go for making your own chili. There are plenty of other books available, one of which I'll cover later, but if you're looking for something quick and easy to go over to for some chili ideas, this Chili Madness by Jane Butel is certainly one way to go. Now again, I got this at a secondary market, but there are definitely copies available on eBay. There's some on Etsy. You can find this book, or its more recent edition, available on Amazon as well. So it's definitely out there, and it's worth checking out, especially if you love chili and want to make your own. Anyway, I'm the Deceptiwolf. This has been Jane Butel's Chili Madness 80s version, and I bid you good night.